Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about a couple of things, such as root cause of binge and emotional eating, and why 90% of the female population in North America are struggling with it, as well as 40 to 50% of those men. I'm one of those people. I am an emotional and binge eater, and usually from the positive side of the emotions, but I think a lot of people deal on the negative side. So I'm one of those guys that just goes bananas at the parties and eating all the hors d'oeuvres and stuff, or having a social occasion. Then we have how hormone imbalances are, can become emotional eating triggers. And I can attest to that too, because as I've gone through bodybuilding contests and things like that, the fluctuation in hormones going back and forth when you're dieting versus non-dieting can be extreme. So today, as our guest expert, we have Amber Romaniuk, who is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert with 11 years experience helping high-achieving women create a level of body confidence, intuition, and optimal health through powerful mindset healing, self-care, and overcoming self-sabotage with food. Amber overcame her own emotional eating after gaining and losing more than 1,000 pounds and spending over $50,000 on binge foods and spending 5 years balancing her hormones and digestion. I can relate to this. It's a topic that we touched on in our Ultimate Nutrition book, Matt and I, when we actually put psychological, emotional, social, and cultural needs at the base of our pyramid, which almost no dietary elements really address, and how your neurochemistry works, how your social structures, early childhood trauma, or late trauma in life can really influence these decisions. So Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Wade. I'm really excited to be with you today.
So I have, being a former personal training and, advisor to thousands of people in my past life before we started Bioptimizers, we'd run into this all the time. Like, let's face it, the diet strategies that are out there were all fundamentally based on bodybuilding mechanics. And what I would say is that if you look at the bodybuilding and fitness community, whether you go to a local show or the top level at the Mr. or Miss Olympia, the strategies that people are deploying in order to get them in shape. What's interesting is that a lot of people in that industry also suffer from the same conditions, and people might not know it. And it seems to be very impactful, particularly for young women. Young women, I think, are much more sensitive to negative emotion, and starts in their teenage years. They have wilder fluctuations on their hormonal profile, because as men, we're kind of like a 24-hour cycle, where a woman's a 28, 35-day cycle that goes through these various periods. And this has massive impacts on how we feel about ourselves, our ability to stay on track, our ability to, why we binge and stuff like that. And so many people start making a self-judgment about themselves or their inevitability. And I would deal with this all the time. It's like, listen, it's not the program that's the problem. It's your ability to adhere to it. And as you have these challenges, we need to address those coming up. And so I'm delighted to hear that you've taken the charge with your own experience. Maybe you can share with the background, a little bit of your background about how you got to this position. I mean, losing 1,000 pounds is impressive. What it didn't say is like how much of that weight you had gained back during those times. It's like
Yeah.
it's a 2,000 pound program there, really, right? Which is
Yeah.
a ton of emotions and a ton of, you know, crying yourself to sleep at night, or why am I doing this? And I see this so often with people. We have a psychological crisis going on. So many people on
Mhm.
antidepressants. And if I would look at the correlation between negative impact and psychological conditions and eating disorders, I think there's a very high correlation. What's been your
Yes.
experience?
I 100% everything you just said. And so that whole 1,000 pounds was when I was deep in binge eating, bulimia, food addiction, sugar addiction. And initially, I lost like 50 pounds. And then I started binge eating and gained 80. And then it was this back and forth 20, 30, 40 pounds every few months because I was either trying to use my next quote unquote diet strategy, over exercising, trying to lose the weight again, or I was completely losing control with food and binge eating several nights a week until I was so full I was sick. And that cycle went on for a few years for me. And obviously, what it was rooted in was self loathing and feeling unworthy and not feeling good enough. I was bullied on the bus when I was 5. It was my first day taking the bus by myself, and the older boys called me fat and ugly, and then the whole bus made fun of me. And that was a very traumatizing moment for me because I didn't know how to brush that off, and it did wound my inner child, and I did hang on to that for a very long time until I started healing. And then I grew up in a household where ultra processed food was available like all the time, and I could eat whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. And my mom actually had a food addiction my whole life, but I didn't realize it until I healed my own. And she had multiple sclerosis, and I think it was a way for her to cope. And so all of this accumulated, yeah, and then into the teens, and like you start getting conditioned by Hollywood and the media that you're not good enough and that you have to be stick thin. And I grew up in my teens in like 99 into the early 2000s, and the popular era was like skinny as possible, like zero, size zero, right?
Hmm.
So it was like really bad, so much pressure. And so all of this just spiraled this like duality of either complete loss of control with food or trying to grip control with the diets and over exercise. Because it's so ironic because these big industries, diet, weight loss, food industry, Hollywood media, they created the problem. They're the ones that condition women and men to be so insecure of themselves, all the trends, all the photoshopping and editing, which they don't tell you about. And then they create the quote unquote solution. Here's the diet. You diet and you cut calories to lose weight and keep it off, and then you'll finally be happy. And when you can have something drilled into your subconscious mind for long enough, even if it's a lie, you start to believe it, right? Like they're good at this stuff. And so I think so many of us were just so conditioned that this is the way, when it actually creates more havoc in the body. It creates more of a perfection mentality to try to diet perfectly to attain a result that is usually unattainable because it's not addressing the roots. And so when I got to my low point moments where I was so addicted to food that I was throwing it in the garbage and eating out of my garbage can and throwing it in the dumpster in the back alley and going and eating it out of the dumpster, I was like, this is more than a diet. Like, this is more than me trying to find the right diet. Like, I have a serious addiction and I need to take ownership and responsibility and figure out why I'm doing this and what's going on. And that's what helped me heal multidimensionally, which was like physical healing, actually, like cleaning up my eating and figuring out how to eat for me. But the biggest part was the mental emotional healing, which was building self-worth, learning how to connect with my body, becoming in tune, learning what my triggers were and that they were teachers and I needed to understand what I needed instead of food. It was having healthier strategies to cope. It was stopping dieting. I was addicted to dieting too. So it was like healing that addiction, healing the overexercise addiction, and figuring out, wow, like my hormone imbalances are fueling this addiction. And I'm so depleted in dopamine and serotonin and my neurotransmitters that that's fueling this addiction. And so starting to understand all of these pieces and learning about them and then being my own guinea pig and healing them was very liberating and freeing. It gave me my life back and everything I have to this day, which I'm so grateful for. And it also really inspired me because so much of the support out there is either a diet or it's talk therapy, which is fine, but like where's the accountability? Like you said, we've got to address the roots of these behaviors and these habits that are stemmed from neurotransmitter deficiencies, hormone imbalances, not feeling good enough, trauma, and wounding. And that's where we need to normalize the conversation that has not yet, in my opinion, been normalized in the mainstream because it doesn't make these big companies a lot of money. But that's why we're here. And so that's what really catapulted me into starting my business. And, over the last 12 years, just seeing the same kinds of root causes for women and men that I work with and really helping them address these roots. And so I really think that we need to normalize root cause healing rather than all the quick fixes because it just keeps people distracted and stuck in this vicious cycle and makes it worse. So that was my experience.
Right. And how long did you struggle with this whole scenario?
Yeah, so unconsciously, I was an emotional eater probably from 5 until 21, and it really hit hard when I was 21 to about 24, like really bad. 6 months of bulimia. Otherwise, I was binge eating 6 nights a week until I was so full I was sick for that 2 or 3 years. And then I spent probably 2 or 3 years like really diligently healing it before I started my business. It,
Wow, that's
yeah.
that's a long journey.
Hmm.
It's a long journey. So let's talk about, you know, you talk about early childhood trauma and maybe some of the mitigations that people do. So like eating disorders are a way to take kind of like tyrannical control of an uncontrollable element, which also, like any tyranny, they tend to fall
Hmm.
gradually, at some point in time. How, like, what was it like being in the throes of that? What were you feeling? What was the narrative going on in your mind or in your life, or how did you see the world at that point?
Well, I think when that bullying moment happened, that was just significant. And I felt so insecure. And I'm like, I hate boys because they're so mean. Right. And then it was just like witnessing my mom's decline as a child with MS, like just slowly losing control of her body and being an only child and feeling like I couldn't actually express all the grief that I was going through with my parents because am like, they have enough on their plate. I don't want to be a burden. So I literally took it upon myself to just hold everything inside. And I think that had a significant impact on me as a child because I just felt like I had to go at it all alone. And I feel like I had to grow up a lot quicker than I maybe wanted to. And it's not my parents' fault. They did the best they could with the circumstance. But that's where I really found myself other than my father, like, yeah, not wanting to have any friends as that were boys because I didn't trust them and really just keeping everything inside and looking back, just like I was always eating, watching TV, getting home and having a snack, like, and eating more than, sitting down and eating 4 cookies, sitting down and eating 2 whole chocolate bars and like not even realizing. And I think when you're insecure as a child and you also want to be loved, there was that like people pleasing factor that was birthed. I want to, right, be loved. And so I'm going to do extra things for people and I'm going to overgive because I want to be validated that I'm good enough. Because when that bus moment happened, like I felt so unworthy and so unloved, even though it's these people that I had never met. And so that really stuck with me. And then I think you start getting influenced, like I said, by Hollywood and the media, and you start reading magazines and listening to this music and seeing all these images that are getting implanted in your subconscious mind. And you further observe that in order for me to be loved and desirable and successful, I need to look a certain way to be approved of by everybody. And so that's what really, I think starts that diet mentality and that restrictive mentality and that all is just so unhealthy for your psyche. And so many women and men go through that. And I think the biggest thing that I learned, from childhood was there's so much sadness and grief and stress and fear and worry and things that I stored in my nervous system that I never processed until I started my healing journey. And no wonder I wanted to numb out and check out with food because my system was constantly in this fight or flight stress response. I was in survival mode from a very young age. And I think that, that whole process just made it easy to seek food for comfort and have that become the comfort zone. And then when I started dieting, it was just like my, what I call the ego mind, the inner critic just got so loud, like the drill sergeant. Like you have to, my first diet I did, I was 11 and I did like
Wow.
the raw salsa diet. I only
Hmm.
lasted like 2 days, but it was like raw onion, raw tomato, and cucumber. And I hated onion and tomato, but I was just desperate to try and lose weight. Right. And then from there, I was like trying all these other things because
What were
that's
some of
what I
the
was
things
being
that, what were
told.
some of the things, what were some of the things that you tried?
Yeah, so that one, the raw salsa diet, I did South Beach. I did do like low carb. I did man, I don't even remember the name. Was it LA weight loss?
Yeah.
There's like some old ones that like totally don't exist anymore, but I tried so
Yep.
many different things, vegan, vegetarian, that trashed my digestive system. That made me want to binge even more. Holy moly, cutting out animal protein was the most reckless decision I could have ever made. But I read the book by Brendan Brazier at the time that owned Vega, and he essentially like indoctrinated me into thinking that meat was bad. And I believed it because when you're desperate and insecure, you'll believe anything anyone says, especially if there's a promise for weight loss. And that just trashed everything even more. So yeah, those are some of the things that I tried, and obviously they just all amplified the loss of control, and the binges would get worse and bigger. And then I would try the next thing and of course fail, and it would hit my confidence even more. And I was just left in this space of hopelessness. There's something wrong with me. I don't have willpower. I'm unworthy. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to be lovable. I'm never going to get anything I want because I can't lose the weight and keep it off. And what's wrong with me? Why can't I just have a bit of sugar? Why can't I just have a bit of this without losing control? When of course it didn't have anything to do with willpower. But again, these are the what I call like the lies that were sold by the industry, that it is about willpower. It is about you just finding the right diet, and it just keeps you stuck in this cycle. It was exhausting to say the least. It was
What were,
absolutely draining.
no doubt, it's emotionally and physically draining. What were some
Yeah.
of the you talked about over exercising as
Oh
well.
yeah.
What was that trend?
Oh my goodness. So I started working out diligently after a breakup when I was 21, and I started to get like that workout high, and it felt so good. And that breakup was like fueling my workout. So I was doing 2 hours a day, an hour of cardio, an hour of strength training. I had no idea what I was doing. I was doing the same workout every day because I was seeing weight loss. And so I thought that I just have to keep doing this. And I was doing a lot of walking really quickly on the highest incline because I was doing a lot of mountain climbing at the time. And you have to be in shape for that or it's hellish. And we were doing a lot of really, difficult scrambles and things. So that was a focus. And I found obviously as I lost 50 pounds, it was way easier to hike and scramble and like all of that kind of stuff. But when I tried to keep doing it after a few months and I quote unquote reached my goal weight, like my period disappeared, my mood dropped significantly. I was starting to be extensively depleted with energy. I was only eating 900 calories a day and probably burning like 1,500 plus a day. I was some days doing my morning workout, then going to hot yoga and then going to a dance class. Like I was way overdoing it and completely skyrocketing my cortisol. Um, and it was five. I usually maybe one day a week I had a rest day, but it was usually 6 to 7 days a week. And the level of guilt that I felt if I thought about skipping a workout was significant because I was tying my worth up with that. And I also had this deep fear of if I don't go, I'm going to gain weight. I need to exercise to lose weight and keep it off. Like all these insecurities and fears were being built. And if I didn't go, I was so mean to myself. And it became this asphyxiation and in this obsession because if I got to the gym and the elliptical was being used, because that was the first thing I did, I would be so pissed and be like, well, screw it. My workout's ruined. I might as well just go home. Like that all or nothing perfection was massive. And that exercise schedule was just making it even worse. And then I sprained my ankle so bad. And the physio's like, don't do these exercises or it will not heal. And I was so stubborn. Like, this is when you're in this addiction, right? And this compulsion and obsession with your weight, you ignore every recommendation. And here I am, like 2 years still. My ankle hasn't healed. I have plantar fasciitis. I'm spending thousands of dollars a month I don't have on physio, all of this stuff. Like, and then I just finally got to the point where I'm like, what am I doing? But that was the like what I call that drill sergeant. It was so harsh. And it so between the exercise and the yo-yoing with the food, it just completely pushed me. It actually pushed me into being postmenopausal at 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the moment of clarity where you're like, okay, like what was it particularly that
Hmm.
allowed you to start moving in the positive direction?
Yeah. So it was a couple years into the binge eating where I had really become aware that I was binge eating. I'm like, this is what I'm doing because I wasn't able to identify it for a while. And that low point moment night where I threw the food in the garbage and then I ate it in the garbage and then I threw it in the dumpster and then I went and ate it out of the dumpster. That was huge for me because I was in such a denial that what I was doing wasn't a big deal. I'm like, food's my friend. It feels good. I like my workout schedule. Like it was such a huge denial. And, the other piece that was blocking me from wanting to do anything about it was the fear of change, the fear of trying something different, the fear of taking ownership and learning how to deal with my stuff. Now I had gained all the weight and I was 80 pounds overweight and I was still trying to do all the same exercise. So the intimidation of an overwhelm of like, I have 80 pounds to lose. I have no idea of anything of what to do. Like there was so much intimidation and overwhelm and fear of unknown. So that all kept me stuck. But those garbage can dumpster moments crushed the denial that it wasn't a big deal and crushed all my fear. And the suffering got so big in that moment that I could no longer sit in this comfort zone of suffering and tolerate it. And that's what really got me onto the journey.
So, what was the process of that journey going in the right direction? What did you do to kind of right the ship?
Yeah, so it was like all over the place. The first thing that I started learning about was processed sugar because that was my big kryptonite. And I started to learn that sugar was 10 times more addictive than cocaine. And that was shocking to me. And to learn about the food industry and that they were purposely designing food on purpose to give you a dopamine high and make you addicted was mind blowing. Like I knew nothing about anything. And so I started to really learn about the food industry and all the corruption. And it started to empower me that it wasn't me and that there was other things that were contributing. And so then I worked toward cutting out processed sugar, gluten, and dairy because I was just as addicted to wheat and dairy. I would eat a piece of cheese and then eat the whole block, eat a piece of bread, eat the whole loaf. So I was severely addicted to the gluten and the casein as well. I don't make my clients do that necessarily, but my addiction was just so severe that I needed a period of time without those things because I kept losing control. And then from there, when I wanted to binge on like 10 bananas and a jar of natural peanut butter, I'm like, this isn't just the food. I need to figure out what's going on emotionally. And so then I started to realize I need to know what's triggering me. I don't know what's triggering me. So I actually made a list of all the different things that were triggering me. So there's emotional eating triggers like loneliness, boredom, getting on the scale, not liking the number that I saw, physical triggers like I'm tired and I want to eat more. I'm fatigued and I don't care what I eat. I just want to eat what I want. I started to learn that my hormone imbalances became triggers. I started to realize that I'm really sensitive energetically and I take on everyone's stuff, and that triggers me to want to binge, right? So I had to really take a massive kind of inventory of what was triggering me so that I could start catching my triggers and hopefully catch them and then be able to go, okay, instead of food, what do I really need? And start giving myself that, which was a huge step forward in my progression. And then also just being really honest with myself that like I hate myself. I don't know how to process emotion. I don't have any healthy strategies to cope. So then I started to work on finding healthy strategies to cope with my triggers. I actually started feeling my emotions because I was terrified to do that and thought something bad would happen if I did. And I started to really work on catching negative self talk and all the negative programming that I had taken in the last 20 years from all these external sources and myself, and started to rewire my subconscious mind with repetition of meditations, visualizations, affirmations, apologizing to and forgiving myself, starting to heal my wounded inner child. That bus bully thing, like I went in 12 times with her and helped her heal that and let go of that from my body. So those were some of the key things that really helped me fully heal those behaviors. And then it was about, wow, I have the hormones of a postmenopausal 65-year-old. I need to figure out how to deal with that. It was my gut was a mess. Like if I went out in the wind, I'd be like looking 8 months pregnant for 10 days. Like it was so bad. So I had to really work on that healing. And as I did those things, obviously I learned all the key pieces that were connected to the work that I was going to be helping my clients with. But That's the long and short of it. But those are the root things. I had to heal people pleasing. I had to heal perfection. I quit the gym for a while. I'm like, I need to heal. And it's funny because I quit binge eating and then I gained 80 pounds again. And I was like, why am I gaining all this weight? And then I started to realize that weight was this protective mechanism and my body was hanging on because she didn't feel safe. And the workouts I was doing and all of that stuff was pushing her over the edge with all these hormone issues I had. So I quit and I just focused on rest and healing and my hormones, and it fell off within a year. Within a year, I was at my natural set point, no diets, no restriction, just stretching and walking. And then I started playing around with mindful movement that felt good for me rather than the stuff I was doing before. And since then, like I've attained the same weight. I don't weigh myself. I just go by the way I feel. And my focus is safety and making my hormones are dialed in because that those are two key things. I eat well, like all that stuff's easy. So it's really yeah, those are the things that were very incredibly important for me to get because we've been just sold so many lies about, how to lose weight and the health and all those things. So, yeah.
What were some of the things that you did in conjunction? Because it's a lot of psychology
hmm
elements that you're dealing with those things. What were some of those areas that you dealt with?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest ones, and this is what I think everyone needs to work on, is mastering your ego and learning how to live more in your power. And so I deem it the ego, but some people call it the shadow. It's your inner critic. It's literally the part of you that's birthed between ages 0 and 7 that you create your identity with based on what you observe around you, the people and the way they behave, the kind of content you consume, the kind of toys you play with. All of this shapes your ego identity. And that is primarily meaning you're living in your head where you're more critical. You are obsessive. You're overwhelmed lies. Your negative self-talk, fear, worry, anger, frustration, jealousy, hatred. These are all emotions that the ego wants us to feel. Now, of course, we're going to feel a wide array of different emotions, and that's a normal part of human experience. But it's not our normal state of being to constantly be in fight or flight and constantly be in negative emotion and negative self-talk. Our natural state is rest and digest, is thriving, is self love, is confidence, is worthiness, is joy. However, we have been so conditioned in society that our comfort zone is all these negative things. And then we attract a bunch of stuff we don't want. So for me, and I still to this day, I'm working on mastering my ego, but to recognize that is not me, that is a voice that has been morphed and built. And it is what triggers all of my insecurities. It triggers my body to get stressed. I make poor choices if that voice is in control. I people please. Go for perfection. I binge, whatever it is. I doubt myself. I don't feel good enough. Okay, what triggers me to give my power away to that way of being and that feeling and that voice? And how do I take my power back? So it was a lot of building awareness. Truly, awareness is the biggest superpower because when I would start to feel those first signs of like, oh, I want a people pleaser, oh, I want validation, or oh, I'm triggered, it would be like, okay, my ego's taking over. What is going on? Like there's something for me to heal. And so that has been a very freeing and liberating experience because I live so much more in my power and realize if some insecurity comes up for healing, well, let's heal it so that I can continue to live more in peace and power. And having tools to cope is incredibly important. So that was huge. And I think another big thing is and still to this day is being aware of my self-talk, being aware of the way I speak to myself and others, being aware of the words I say about money or my business or people around me because they all carry a frequency and an energy. And really working on catching again those negative affirmations and those negative thoughts, and going to something of a more positive perception or a shift of perception or getting curious about why I've been thinking or feeling the way that I have. So that has, to me, that's the biggest piece is learning how to take your power back from your ego. You'll always have one unless you become enlightened, which of course is a possibility. But we come to planet Earth to have a dualistic experience and to come home to our hearts and to live a more heart-led life. I also feel like from a, neurological level, I guess you could say more of rewiring my brain, like learning about neural pathways. And one of the reasons why I was so triggered to binge or like, have certain behaviors was because I literally was repeating them on a daily basis. And even if I didn't want to, when that evening time came, that pathway was lighting up and it was like, you binge, like you behave like this, do this. And so recognizing I physically wired these patterns in my brain and that I had to now work on unwiring and rewiring was again very liberating. Like the brain and the way that it works is so fascinating. Learning about the amygdala and the fight or flight center, and that your brain wants to keep you in survival mode, not, you know, joy and happiness, and realizing that your brain wants to keep you in what's comfortable, even if you're suffering in it, and that we have to get uncomfortable to heal and to make change and get where we want to go was also very liberating. So I would acknowledge, wow, I feel really uncomfortable about this. Perfect. This is exactly what I need to do or work through. Like if I'm uncomfortable about something, great. Why? And that's the next step I need to take. Being vulnerable, having a difficult conversation, setting a boundary, whatever it is. Because once I do that, I feel more in my power, more free. My nervous system regulates more good things come in. So those were huge parts for me to really master that I teach to all of my clients as well, because we can live in our minds so easily and it really calls the shots if we're not aware that there is a difference. And I think those changes are really what helped regulate my hormones, build my neurotransmitters, because once I shifted my mindset, I started taking care of myself in a more aligned way. I started sleeping better and prioritizing my needs. And I think those things were huge for all of that shift.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Are you familiar with the Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins?
Yes.
Yeah, so that I think for those who haven't been exposed to the Map of Consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins, he was a psychiatrist who was also a nutritionist. He was really the foundational aspects of orthomolecular nutrition for psychiatry, and was dealing with extreme cases of schizophrenia, etc. And he was able to correct a lot of behaviors by dietary regulation. And in his Map of Consciousness, if you dive deep into it, he's got a lot of books on it. His first one's Power versus Force. A lot of people would probably start with one of his later books, which was called Letting Go.
Mm-hmm.
But you get the idea. I mean, he has a conscious, you can look it up online. And if you see that level, all of those things that you were talking about, the energy fields that don't affirm positive brain chemistry, positive neurochemistry, positive emotional states, self-view, God view, worldview, all of that, all calibrate under the level of 200, which is, pride, anger, desire, fear. Then you get into the really bad ones like shame, guilt, humiliation, and those elements. And when elements like that occur early in the childhood, it can be it can really shape the neuronal development inside of the brain. And of course, courage is the delineation mark at 200, where you're able to look at the things that are uncomfortable to look at. And then you move up into neutrality, and then willingness, and then reason, and then eventually get to the higher fields. Again, it changes again at 500, which is a more heart-centered life, which is love, unconditional love. And then at 600 is a state of what's called peace, and the beginning of the enlightenment phases. And you can go up from there. I recommend everyone that's struggling with any aspect of emotional dysregulation, and pretty much everybody is on some level. It might not be diet related, it might be work related or relationship related, whatever. I think that map becomes a great tool, because now, first off, it takes away that I'm the only person doing this.
Yeah.
Two, that there is actually a map. I need to get to this state as a baseline. And if I do that, there is a big shift in hormonal killer cells, immune system,
Yeah.
neurochemistry, all of that stuff. One of the areas I'm fascinated with is, neurochemistry. And you touched on it a little briefly. So, you have, there's a Braverman test that you can take online, which determines which neurochemical dominant element that you might have, which is really cool.
Huh.
Now I think there's some DNA tests that you can take as well. I've done all those things just to understand the different drivers behind the population. So, for example, there was a
Right.
coach, Charles Poliquin, who trained, I think it was Olympic athletes, and it's like almost 30 different gold medalists, like 30 different sports. He trained gold medal Olympic
Huh.
athletes. And he would do a neurochemical test on people. And if they didn't have dopamine or acetylcholine as their dominant neurochemistry, he's like, I can't train you. You're not going to be successful. And what was interesting, if you had a dopamine driven or a acetylcholine driven, these people could be in the same sport doing completely different workout programs based on their recovery. And the cross correlation, interesting enough, in neurochemistry is related to Chinese medicine. So
Mm.
that there's no branch on the physiological aspects except at the neurochemical level. And I work with a world-renowned, well, he's world renowned in a variety of fields. He was a nuclear physicist. He's a Chinese medicine master, and he also works on what we call neurofeedback, which is where you're doing EEGs and then a variety of different devices and stuff that you can use to repattern, rewire the brain. Tony Robbins talks about that in his work. He's using neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a student of that,
Hmm.
like pairing both emotion and energy and affirmation in order to overwrite old programs that don't work. And he's got 100% success rate so far in dealing with people who are
Yeah.
suicidal, which is pretty incredible because that's kind of like
That's
at the
amazing.
lowest level. It's not worth living. The
Yeah.
pain that I'm experiencing in my life means that leaving the world would be much better.
Yeah.
And I watch that guy reverse those things. So my message to the population is this isn't this isn't an area that the dietary world fundamentally addresses. They don't get
Mm.
it. They don't relate to it. And when people struggle with weight, they often just further amplify it, saying, well, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I'm no
Yeah.
good, I have this, or they go to a medical doctor who rationalizes their element through a neurochemical test, puts them on some medication, says, well, you're just going to have to deal with this for life.
Yes.
What made it possible for you and for your clients to kind of change that there's nothing I can do about this into a state of I can do something about that? What is that? Like, how does that
Yeah.
happen?
Oh my gosh. I think it's so much magic and it's sometimes hard to describe it because it's like this feeling that you cultivate as you heal. But I think some of the things that really help with that are starting to first off like give someone like reassurance that they can change it by helping them learn and understand why they are feeling and behaving the way that they are. Because we're not taught how to be connected with our bodies or the interconnections between the neuro and the hormones and all these different things. We're just like, I suck and I don't have willpower. And so the education and helping them understand, I think it helps build a lot of confidence. The first time I caught a trigger, I felt so confident and so excited. I'm like, I think I see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I think I can actually change this. And that fuels your desire to keep going, even through the bad days, because like I have some proof and now I can work with that proof. And I think the more you start working on it from that emotional standpoint, while getting the hormones tested, the neurotransmitters tested, seeing what's deficient, seeing what's too high, and providing that support, it helps start to regulate the nervous system, help boost some of these levels. And that helps people start to feel again and feel connected and have less desire to chase a numbing dopamine high or to, they don't feel as critical of themselves. They start to gain energy. They start to have calmer digestion. Their clothes start to fit better. Their cravings resolve. They're sleeping better. And all these shifts physically and emotionally help them also then have this deeper belief, which builds their intuition, helps them shift the frequency. And there's no going back. Like, I don't know anyone who I've worked with that is like gone, like, you'd have to force yourself immensely to go back to that starting point again, because why would you want to go back to that? Right. And so I think it's all of these things multidimensionally that as we're working on them, you just build this momentum that becomes unstoppable. And then you start attracting all these things that you want, and you become more magnetic, more effortlessly. And that just further affirms and fuels your desire to keep going. But I do think that first helping them, and when I was working on catching my triggers and actually starting to catch some of them, was a huge momentum builder while supporting the nervous system, having healthy ways to cope, understanding if I had a depletion in serotonin, dopamine, whatever was going on, and working on my hormones, because all of these things were fueling this massive physical and emotional hunger. And, when you start learning, like specifically for a woman, if your progesterone is low, you have a significant negative impact on your neurotransmitters, lower dopamine, lower serotonin, lower GABA, lower oxytocin. You don't sleep well. You have heightened levels of sugar cravings. If you have low oxytocin, like, you feel disconnected from yourself, you feel more critical, you're more prone to people pleasing, and being attached in your relationships, or feeling completely detached. If you don't feel, you're going to want to chase that dopamine high. But if you don't know any of that is what that is or why it's going on, it's just easier to fuel those behaviors. If you don't know your cortisol is high, which increases your, ghrelin, which makes you more hungry and makes you feel less full more easily, like, you're going to feel like you have a hollow leg and not know why. And so when you get this validation of these are some of the other pieces that are fueling this other than what's been going on in your mind, it's very liberating, because they're like, now I have more answers and information. And I think that's the key. And that's the miss in the diet industry, the weight loss industry, right? A lot of the health industry. Because I talk to many women who are like, yeah, they did all these tests, but like, there's no help emotionally, or they're helping me emotionally, but there's no testing and there's no guidance on these pieces. So we need to bring it all together, so that people are getting this full holistic level of support. And that's what will fuel them into the healing. And you have to be committed no matter
Mm.
what. You've got to have the bravery and the courage to keep going and not quit until you get there.
When you're working with clients, what does that typical journey look like for them? Like, obviously, when they reach out to you, it's a moment of courage because there's an extreme level of vulnerability that they're admitting that they have
Mhm.
a problem and they don't know how to solve it, and they're looking to you to help solve that. What's that journey look like for the individual?
Yeah. So first, it's helping them feel safe and holding a safe space, because you're right, it's very vulnerable. Often they're opening up for the first time. It's their secret in the closet that they're hiding in shame and guilt with. And so holding a safe space and just hearing them and starting to help them again understand why they're doing what they're doing and why everything they've tried hasn't worked is very helpful to help them accept that a different approach is likely what is going to help them. And then from there, like, the average amount of time is usually 12 to 24 months. It takes time to heal. Most of the women that come to me are, have been struggling for years or decades. And they're like, enough is enough. I need to make the change. So, it's very liberating, because even after the first session, they're so heightenedly aware of what's triggering them. And now they can start to go out into their lives and deal with those triggers, and they can reach out for support. I think that that's one of the most pivotal parts of healing, is actually having someone or a support team that can also help you and hold you accountable. Because it's one thing to like think about your triggers or be like, yeah, I want to learn about my ego, or now I have all the information about my hormones, but then life happens and you may walk out of your session and something slaps you across the face and you have a choice point. Are you going to go self-sabotage again, or are you going to try and use your tools and reach out for help and shift it? Right? So accountability and support are incredibly important, because it's going to take time to rewire your brain and take your power back from your ego and raise your vibration. So helping them understand those triggers, a lot of them start building momentum really quickly and see a reduction of every day to once a week to once a month within the first, 1 to 3 months. It's significant. Women who are binging and purging for decades are now stopping the purge and taking ownership and seeing that completely fall away. So that's a significant shift that they're seeing in a few weeks or a few months, which then opens up the body's ability to do a lot more healing, hormones, gut, blood sugar, whatever it is that, they're having health complaints about. And as they start to feel better physically and emotionally, then we can start really working on helping them take their power back. That ego mastery work that I was talking about earlier. So they start to have some capacity, because in the beginning they have no capacity. Their nervous system is so stressed. They feel so afraid to get uncomfortable. So we don't want to push people in the deep end. So as they build some capacity and they're building some confidence, that's when we have conversations around, you're a massive people pleaser. It's important we start working on setting boundaries, saying no, blocking time in your schedule for yourself, clearing the guilt around making yourself a priority. That's huge. I see that all the time because it's going to be uncomfortable. You don't want to dysregulate someone's system so much if you push them in too quickly, right? So it's also a dance of intuitively feeling into what do they have capacity to actually process, right? Versus what is, in my opinion, irresponsible to push someone into too quickly to where you're going to just potentially make them shut down. There's a fine dance with that. So and then they start setting boundaries to start prioritizing their needs. It starts to feel comfortable and familiar to feel through emotions, to go into negative self-talk, to set a boundary, to say no, to catch perfection and prevent it from happening. And that's what helps them completely shift their identity into a more balanced life, into no more binge and emotional eating, into self-love, into self-worth, into making significant changes with their careers, their jobs, their relationships, right? And then they have the courage to make these big changes that they have been afraid to change for years because all this insecurity was just so heavy. And there's, healing miracles happen. I've had clients with injuries that weren't healing that finally healed, or like hemoglobin A1C numbers that were crazy. And then they're coming back into normal ranges and their doctors are like, this is impossible. What did you do? Blah, 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 blah. And like they can come off of medication. So like the body's always trying to heal. And when we really let the body heal on all levels, some really amazing things happen. So yeah, that's the process. It's deep, but it's very empowering and liberating.
So I want you to give an unbridled pitch to why people should reach out to you if they're struggling with this elements. I think it would be worthwhile to point out that you've gone through this journey, and it's been a long journey, obviously. And so you know a lot of ins and outs, and you work with people in this space, I think, that make a difference. And one of the things that we are very proud of in the Awesome Health community, or in the Bioptimizers community, is bringing people to first liners like yourself who are dealing with the day-to-day implications of whatever their health challenges. In this case, it's eating disorders or weight gain and stuff like that. So please let it fly. How people can reach you, what they can try, what's the whole process, just give us your best pitch, because I think there could be somebody listening today that's like right at that breaking point. And if you're listening to this podcast today and you're on that edge, that you need to do something, and you're listening to this and you want to do something, maybe it's time to reach out to Amber. So go ahead.
Thank you. So first, a question for yourself, which is, are all the things you're trying, like get really honest with yourself, are they giving you the results that you want long term? And if they're not, are you honestly ready to open up and take a different approach? Because ideally what you're doing is probably keeping you distracted from going inward and doing the deeper work. And that's what I really, really always preach, is this process works because we're addressing the root causes of why you feel the way you do about yourself, why you're in self-sabotage with food, why you have the weight struggles or the hormone issues or the mood stuff or whatever it is that's going on for you. We figure out the roots, and we take what I call multidimensional approach, where we're healing on a physical, mental, emotional, energetic, behavioral, chemical, like all the levels. And if you take the time to do that, you are going to give yourself a big gift, because when you address the roots, you learn so much about yourself. And as you are willing to face yourself and take ownership and responsibility through the ups and downs, you are going to fully step into the person you have always dreamed of being. And this is the final piece of the puzzle. Many have the career, they have the money, they have the relationship, they have everything else, but there's this emptiness inside because they don't have self-connection, and they're fighting with themselves and food. So this is a sign, an opportunity for you to try something different. Because one of the things that always lights people up is to really reflect and ask yourself, like, what is possible by you healing this? And what is it costing you to let it stay in the way? because everything you want is on the other side of the fear. And miracles happen. I got my life back because I healed. And that's what I want for everyone else on this planet, and to know that you're not alone. So that's my pitch. And don't let the shame and the embarrassment hold you back from taking a step, because it could change your life forever for the better.
Where can people find you, reach you, look you up, research you, get in contact with you?
Yeah, so the podcast is called the No Sugarcoating Podcast. We have over 600 episodes, and it's great free resource for you to start listening to and building awareness. The website is amberapproved.ca. We have a free emotional eating quiz if you're wondering if you're struggling. As well, you can book a consultation. It's complimentary, and we can talk more about your goals, your struggles, where you're seeking support, and why a different approach may be exactly what you need. There's all kinds of other resources and things on the website, some workshops and things if you want to self-study, but those would be the main resources. And then I'm on Instagram, and it's my name at Amber Romaniuk, Romaniuk.
Amber, I can totally feel where you're coming from. So it's lovely to interview someone from a heart-based place who's overcome a really serious challenge and then is taking your journey not just to solve your own, but for other people. So it's an honor and a privilege to have you on the podcast. Thank you for being here. And for all our listeners, take the plunge. As a coach, I saw so many people suffer needlessly, but the person felt that they had to suffer in order to live their best life, look the way they feel, and feel good about themselves on the inside. And, one of the things I used to say to my clients is like, getting you to lose the weight, that's not the issue. Addressing the elements that you think that losing the weight is going to give you, that's going to be the bigger journey. And when we get those answers, then you'll have come full circle and you won't need me anymore. And so my goal was to always graduate people away from me as opposed to keep them in the loop. And I think that was one of the reasons was successful back in the day. And it's one of the reasons why I think you're very successful as well. So thank you for joining the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.